Elijah Washington sits stunned in his private jet, staring at the airline's formal apology on his tablet. 6 hours ago, he'd been publicly humiliated and forced to vacate his business class seat. Now, as CEO of Washington Enterprises, he holds termination notices for the entire flight crew in his other hand. The ultimate revenge should feel sweeter, but the hollow victory reminds him that no amount of success shields a black man from America's oldest disease. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location. In the comments below, hit that like button and subscribe to witness how one moment of discrimination led to a corporate earthquake that changed an entire airline industry. Now let's rewind to see how Elijah Washington rose to power before this fateful flight. Growing up in the unforgiving streets of Southside Chicago, Elijah Washington understood from an early age that the world operated on different rules for people who looked like him. His mother, Patricia, a devoted high school teacher, drilled into him the mantra that would shape his existence: you must be twice as good to get half as far. His father, James, who worked 3 jobs to keep their modest apartment warm and food on the table, showed him what relentless work ethic truly meant. By age 12, Elijah was already exceptional. While other kids played basketball after school, he built primitive computer systems from discarded parts he collected from neighborhood electronics shops. His bedroom transformed into a laboratory of innovation, wires sprawling across the floor like urban vines, seeking technological sunlight. Patricia would stand in his doorway, both concerned and proud as her son worked late into the night, his young face illuminated by monitor light. "Mom, one day I'm going to build something that changes everything," he would tell her, eyes never leaving his screen. "I believe you," she would answer. "Just remember to change yourself for the better along the way." Those early lessons in resilience paid off. Elijah graduated valedictorian from his high school, earning a full scholarship to MIT, where he double majored in electrical engineering and business administration. College presented new challenges. In lecture halls filled with privileged students, Elijah often found himself the only black face in a sea of white. Professors occasionally mistook him for custodial staff or asked him if he was in the right classroom. Each slight hardened his resolve. During his junior year, Elijah developed a revolutionary algorithm that dramatically improved telecommunications efficiency. His thesis advisor recognized its potential immediately and encouraged him to patent the technology. This became the foundation for what would eventually grow into Washington Enterprises. After graduation, rather than accepting lucrative offers from established tech giants, Elijah took the riskier path of securing venture capital to launch his own startup. The early days were grueling. Potential investors often questioned whether he was just the technical guy and asked to speak with whoever runs the business side. Elijah learned to perfect his appearance and presentation, wearing impeccable custom suits to meetings, speaking with precision, and leaving no detail to chance. "Your appearance is your armor," his first business mentor, a successful black entrepreneur named Marcus Taylor, told him. "In rooms where they're looking for any reason to doubt you, give them nothing but excellence to see." Washington Enterprises started in a cramped office space with just 4 employees. Their first breakthrough came when Elijah's enhanced telecommunications technology caught the attention of military contractors seeking more reliable communication systems for deployed troops. This initial contract provided the capital needed to expand research and development efforts. By 32, Elijah had transformed his company into a telecommunications powerhouse. Washington Enterprises revolutionized how data moved across networks, making internet access faster, more reliable, and accessible in previously underserved areas. Their proprietary technology became the backbone for next-generation wireless systems deployed worldwide. Despite his growing success, Elijah maintained a complicated relationship with his wealth and status. He understood that his resources provided a buffer against some forms of discrimination, but he never deluded himself into thinking money made him immune. He had been followed in high-end stores, questioned about his presence in exclusive neighborhoods, and had taxi drivers pass him despite his immaculate attire. "Money doesn't erase racism," he often reminded his executive team, which he intentionally built to be diverse. "It just changes how it manifests." Now at 41, Elijah stood at the precipice of his greatest achievement yet. After 3 years of negotiation, Washington Enterprises was finalizing a $2 billion deal with Nakamura Technologies, Japan's leading telecommunications provider. This partnership would implement their revolutionary network architecture across Asia, potentially doubling the company's global footprint and cementing Elijah's legacy as one of the most influential tech innovators of his generation. The contract signing was scheduled in Tokyo, with just a 72-hour window to finalize terms before Nakamura's board voted on competing proposals. Missing this meeting wasn't an option. Everything Elijah had built over 20 years hinged on his presence in that boardroom. "Your private jet is having electrical issues, sir," his assistant Morgan Chen informed him the morning of his departure. "The maintenance team says it's not safe to fly until they complete diagnostics and repairs." Elijah processed this information with the calm efficiency that characterized his leadership style. "Book me on the next commercial flight to Tokyo, with a connection through Atlanta. Business class." Morgan nodded, quickly making arrangements. "Meridian Airlines has a flight leaving O'Hare in 3 hours with availability. You'll have a 90-minute layover in Atlanta before the 14-hour flight to Tokyo. That should get you there with 4 hours to spare before the meeting." "Perfect," Elijah replied, reviewing the Tokyo presentation one final time. Sometimes, old-fashioned solutions work just fine. He couldn't have imagined that this routine travel adjustment would trigger a chain of events that would force him to confront America's persistent racial divide, test his principles, and ultimately transform an entire industry's culture. O'Hare International Airport buzzed with its usual controlled chaos as Elijah navigated the terminal. Despite flying commercial instead of private, he maintained his standard of excellence. His charcoal Tom Ford suit was impeccably tailored, his oxblood leather briefcase containing the final contract documents for the Tokyo deal. Years of experience had taught him that appearance wasn't vanity, but necessity. In spaces where black excellence was still viewed as exception rather than expectation, Elijah left nothing to chance. At the premium check-in counter, the agent processed his business class ticket efficiently. "Welcome, Mr. Washington. We're delighted to have you flying with Meridian today," she said, maintaining the professional courtesy afforded to all premium passengers. Security was similarly uneventful. The TSA agent examined his ID with standard scrutiny before waving him through. Elijah noted these normal interactions without comment. They weren't particularly remarkable, but the absence of microaggressions was always silently appreciated. Arriving at gate B23, he found the boarding process already underway. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass, offering a practiced smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Washington. You're welcome to board at any time through the priority lane." Elijah strode down the jetway, briefcase in hand, mentally reviewing key points for the Tokyo negotiation. His company's future expansion depended on presenting their network infrastructure as not just technologically superior, but also more cost-effective in the long term. Numbers and strategy equations flowed through his mind as he stepped onto the aircraft. "Welcome aboard," the flight attendant at the entrance said automatically before her eyes flicked to his boarding pass and then back to his face. Something subtle shifted in her expression. Not outright hostility, but a questioning look that had become all too familiar throughout Elijah's life. "Business class is to your left," she added, her tone carrying a faint note of surprise. Elijah nodded politely and turned left. The business cabin was half full, primarily with white executives typing furiously on laptops or already settling in with noise-canceling headphones. He found his seat, 3A, a window position offering both privacy and a view. After stowing his briefcase in the overhead compartment, he settled into the leather seat and began reviewing documents on his tablet. 10 minutes later, a flight attendant with Brenda Barrett on her name tag approached. Unlike her initial greeting at the aircraft door, she now wore an expression of mild concern. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby passengers to notice. "May I check your boarding pass? I want to make sure you're in the correct seat." Elijah looked up, his face a practiced mask of professional neutrality, despite the familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. He'd been here before. Different settings, Different people, same underlying assumption. He didn't belong. Of course, he replied, handing over his boarding pass. Seat 3A. Brenda examined the document longer than necessary for the simple seat confirmation. This does show 3A, she acknowledged, though her tone suggested an unspoken, however. Elijah returned to his tablet, considering the matter resolved. But Brenda remained standing beside his seat, her presence creating an uncomfortable bubble of attention. Several nearby passengers glanced over with undisguised curiosity. "Is there something else?" Elijah asked, maintaining his composure. Before she could answer, a commotion at the front of the business cabin drew their attention. A middle-aged white man with silver-streaked hair and an expensive but rumpled suit was engaged in animated conversation with another flight attendant. He gestured repeatedly toward the back of the cabin, his voice carrying. "I specifically requested Seat 3A. I always sit in 3A when I fly this route. Check your system again." The flight attendant speaking with him made soothing gestures, attempting to de-escalate his growing agitation. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Whitfield, but our system shows 3A was assigned to another passenger. We've given you 4C, which is also a window seat with all the same amenities." "That's unacceptable," the man identified as Mr. Whitfield insisted. "I'm a Platinum Elite member with over 2 million miles. Seat preferences for members of my status are supposed to be guaranteed." Brenda's attention instantly pivoted from Elijah to the disturbance. "Excuse me," she said, no longer addressing Elijah directly as she moved toward her colleague and the agitated passenger. A brief, hushed conference followed between the two flight attendants and Mr. Whitfield, with frequent glances in Elijah's direction. He maintained his focus on his tablet, though he was no longer processing the information on screen. Experience had taught him exactly what was unfolding. Moments later, Brenda returned with the man trailing closely behind her. "Mr. Washington," she began, her tone shifting to one of practiced customer service. "We have a situation. Mr. Bradley Whitfield here is one of our most valued Platinum Elite members. There seems to have been a mix-up with our seating assignments. He was promised Seat 3A as per his status privileges." Elijah kept his expression neutral. "I booked this seat through my assistant this morning. I have a confirmed assignment for 3A, as you've already verified." Bradley Whitfield stepped forward, a tight smile not reaching his eyes. "Look, I understand the confusion, but I always have this seat. It's practically got my name on it. I've got a bad back, and this specific seat alignment helps on long flights. I'm sure the airline can make it worth your while if you wouldn't mind moving to another business class seat." "I'm afraid I need to decline," Elijah responded calmly. "I selected this seat specifically as well, and I have confirmed documentation." Brenda's pleasant facade faltered slightly. "Sir, Mr. Whitfield is a long-standing elite member with our airline. We'd really appreciate your flexibility in this matter." The subtext was clear. Despite having equal documentation and claim to the seat Elijah was expected to yield, the familiar mathematics of racial accommodation scrolled through his mind. Cause no scenes, make no waves, be agreeable. Don't become the angry black man, regardless of justification. "I understand loyalty programs are important," Elijah replied, "but I also have a confirmed assignment for this specific seat. Perhaps Mr. Whitfield could be offered compensation for taking the alternate seat that's been assigned to him." Bradley's face tightened. "This is ridiculous. I have never had this problem before." "I don't see why this is becoming an issue," Elijah said. "We both have business class seats. The amenities are identical." "It's not the same," Bradley insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I specifically need this seat." Other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. Some appeared uncomfortable. Others seemed to side with Bradley based on their expressions. A few had phones partially raised, recognizing the potential for a situation worth recording. "Is there a problem here?" A new voice entered the conversation. A man with captain's stripes on his shoulders had appeared beside the group. "Captain Richards," Brenda said with evident relief. "We have a seating conflict. Mr. Whitfield, one of our Platinum members, was promised his usual seat 3A, but it was assigned to another passenger during today's booking." The captain turned to assess the situation, his eyes moving between Bradley Whitfield and Elijah Washington. "I see. And who had the seat first?" "Mr. Whitfield always sits in this seat," Brenda replied quickly. "He's one of our most valued customers." Elijah noticed she had neatly sidestepped the actual question of who had been assigned the seat first. "My boarding pass confirms my assignment to 3A, Elijah stated calmly. "I'm happy to show you the confirmation." Captain Preston Richards barely glanced at the offered documentation. "While I understand you have a current assignment, Mr. Washington," Elijah supplied. "Mr. Washington, the issue is that our elite members have certain expectations and privileges. Mr. Whitfield has been loyal to Meridian for many years." "So have I," Elijah noted, though he typically flew private. The captain's expression hardened slightly. "Look, we're already running 15 minutes behind schedule. We need to resolve this quickly to avoid further delays affecting all passengers. Would you be willing to relocate to another seat as a courtesy? It would be greatly appreciated." The implication was clear. Elijah was being positioned as the problem, the obstacle to the flight's timely departure. Dozens of eyes now focused on him, waiting to see if he would be reasonable or difficult. "I understand the time pressure," Elijah said, "but I don't understand why I'm being asked to move when I have valid documentation for this seat. If Mr. Whitfield has a medical need for a specific seat configuration, that should have been properly arranged during booking." Bradley Whitfield's face flushed red. "Are you suggesting I'm lying about my back problems?" "Not at all," Elijah replied. "I'm merely pointing out that if this seat is consistently important to you, there are protocols to ensure it's properly reserved." "This is unbelievable," Bradley muttered loudly. "I've never had this issue before today." The unspoken subtext hung in the air. Bradley Whitfield had never before needed to assert his privilege against someone who looked like Elijah Washington in business class. The confrontation had reached a critical juncture, with tension building like static electricity before a storm. Elijah was acutely aware that as a black man, his options for responding were significantly more constrained than Bradley's. Displaying any anger or frustration would immediately cast him as the aggressor, potentially escalating the situation dangerously. Captain Richards cleared his throat. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to have to insist we resolve this situation immediately. We have over 200 passengers waiting to depart." "I agree," Elijah said evenly. "Mr. Whitfield should take his assigned seat so we can depart on schedule." The captain's jaw tightened. "That's not the resolution I was suggesting." The tension in the business class cabin had become palpable. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pretending to focus on their devices while stealing glances at the unfolding confrontation. Others watched openly, their expressions ranging from discomfort to fascination to thinly veiled judgment. A businessman across the aisle had begun recording discreetly with his phone, sensing the newsworthy potential of what was happening. "Perhaps I wasn't clear," Captain Richards said, his voice hardening with authority. "As the captain of this aircraft, I'm responsible for the safety and timely departure of this flight. I'm asking you to accommodate a valued customer's needs so we can proceed." Elijah measured his response carefully. The captain's invocation of his authority had shifted the dynamic from a seating dispute to a potential security issue. Every black man in America understood the dangerous territory of being labeled non-compliant or difficult in such situations. "I appreciate your position, Captain," Elijah replied, his voice deliberately calm. "However, I purchased a business class ticket with this specific seat assignment, which was confirmed when I boarded. I'm not being difficult. I'm simply expecting the airline to honor its commitment, just as Mr. Whitfield is." Bradley Whitfield stepped closer, his voice lowered, but clearly audible to nearby passengers. "Look, why are you making this so complicated? There are plenty of other seats. Just move and let everyone get on with their day." The subtext was impossible to miss. Know your place, don't cause trouble, your comfort and rights matter less than mine. "I've already explained my position," Elijah said. "I have a valid ticket for this seat." Captain Richards shook his head, disappointment evident in his expression. "I had hoped we could resolve this reasonably." He turned to Brenda. "Call security to the aircraft, please." A chill ran through Elijah. The situation was escalating exactly as he'd feared. He quickly calculated his options. He could continue, standing his ground on principle, risking removal from the flight entirely, which would jeopardize the Tokyo deal and everything he'd worked for, or he could acquiesce, swallowing another indignity in a lifetime collection of them. "That won't be necessary," Elijah said before Brenda could leave. "I'll move, but I want it noted in the flight record that I'm doing so under protest, and I expect this matter to be addressed by customer service after we land." Relief washed over Brenda's face. "Thank you for your cooperation, sir. We have an economy plus seat available with extra legroom." The last vestige of professional courtesy had evaporated. Not only was he being forced to surrender his rightful seat, but they weren't even offering him another business class seat. The downgrade was adding financial insult to the racial injury. "You're moving me from business class to economy?" Elijah asked, his composure finally showing cracks. "I paid for business class." "It's the only seat available," Captain Richards stated flatly. "The rest of the business cabin is full." Elijah looked around. There were at least 2 empty business class seats visible from his position. The lie was as transparent as it was insulting. "Those seats appear to be available," he noted, gesturing to his right. "They're reserved for airline staff," Brenda said quickly. "Company policy." Another passenger, a white woman in her 60s, leaned over from her seat. "Just take what's offered, and let us depart for heaven's sake. Some of us have connections to make." The public censure was the final blow. Elijah felt a familiar fog descend, a protective disassociation honed through decades of navigating these waters. He gathered his tablet and stood, maintaining his dignity through sheer force of will. "I'll need a refund for the difference between business class and economy," he stated. Captain Richards nodded curtly. "Customer service can address that after we land." Security personnel had already appeared at the cabin entrance, summoned by another flight attendant. Their presence wasn't subtle, a clear message about what would happen if Elijah didn't comply with the resolution. Bradley Whitfield was already settling into seat 3A, arranging his belongings with the casual entitlement of someone accustomed to getting his way. He didn't make eye contact with Elijah. The walk from business class to economy felt interminable. Elijah passed row after row of seated passengers, many openly staring. Some expressions held sympathy, others smug satisfaction, most simply the relief of bystanders glad they weren't involved. "Your seat is 23F, Brenda informed him, pointing toward the window in a crowded middle section. Elijah stowed his briefcase and settled into the significantly narrower seat. The contrast was stark, from spacious privacy to being sandwiched between strangers, from legroom to knees pressed against the seat in front, from respectful service to barely concealed contempt. As he adjusted to his new accommodations, a young black woman in the aisle seat caught his eye. She'd been watching the entire procession with a mixture of outrage and recognition. "That was some straight-up bull," she whispered, once Brenda had departed. "I saw what happened. I can't believe they did that to you." Elijah appreciated her solidarity, but maintained his professional facade. "These things happen." "They shouldn't," she replied firmly. "I'm Amara Johnson, by the way. I'm an attorney." "Elijah Washington." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Wait, Washington Enterprises? That Washington?" He nodded slightly, unsurprised. She recognized his name. His company's rise had been featured in numerous business publications, though he generally avoided personal publicity. "I recorded most of what happened," Amara said, holding up her phone discreetly. "With your permission, of course, I won't share it, but you should have documentation." Elijah considered her offer. "Thank you. That might be useful." The captain's voice came over the intercom, thanking everyone for their patience during the seating adjustment and announcing their imminent departure. No apology, no acknowledgement of the injustice, just the mechanical continuation of business as usual. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Elijah stared out the small window, his reflection ghosted against the tarmac backdrop. The familiar weight of racial reality settled on his shoulders. No matter his accomplishments, his wealth, his education, his contributions to technology and society. In moments like these, he was still just a black man expected to give up his seat without complaint. Have you ever been in a situation where you were treated unfairly despite having every right to be there? Comment number 1 if you've experienced discrimination like Elijah, and hit the like button to support those who stand up for themselves in impossible situations. Subscribe to see what happens next, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud and angry. It's calculated and devastating. Will Elijah just accept this humiliation, or does he have something much bigger planned? Let's find out. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Elijah's mind shifted from the sting of humiliation to strategic analysis. Throughout his career, he had transformed obstacles into opportunities, prejudice into power. This situation would be no different. The business deal in Tokyo remained his priority, but now a secondary objective had formed with crystal clarity. He pulled out his tablet and opened a secure messaging application. His executive team was accustomed to his exacting standards and immediate response expectations regardless of the hour. His first message went to Zoe Michaels, his chief legal counsel. Experienced discriminatory treatment on Meridian Airlines Flight 1283. Business class seat taken, downgraded to economy despite valid ticket. Need immediate research on Meridian's parent company, ownership structure, board composition, and any history of discrimination complaints. Within minutes, Zoe replied, "On it. Preliminary info. Meridian is owned by Transglobal Aviation Group. Public company, traded on NYSE. Will have full profile within the hour." Elijah then contacted Marcus Wilson, his chief financial officer. "Need immediate analysis of our investment portfolio. Do we hold any positions in Transglobal Aviation Group or subsidiaries?" Marcus's response came quickly. "Checking now. Give me 10 minutes." Beside him, Amara Johnson had been watching his focused typing with interest. "Not just letting this go, are you?" she said quietly. "I never just let things go," Elijah replied, keeping his voice low. "That's not how change happens." Amara nodded, in understanding. "I specialize in employment and discrimination law. What happened up there wasn't just bad customer service. It was textbook discrimination." "I'm well aware," Elijah said, a lifetime of similar experiences informing his assessment. "Most people would just file a complaint that gets ignored or accept some free miles as compensation," Amara continued. "Something tells me you're thinking bigger." A notification appeared on Elijah's tablet. Marcus with his financial analysis. "We hold Transglobal Aviation Group stock through 3 different funds. Total ownership approximately 12% of outstanding shares. We're among their largest institutional investors, though it's been passive until now." 12%. The number sent a surge of cold satisfaction through Elijah's veins. Not a controlling interest, but significant enough to command attention, and wield considerable influence. He replied immediately, "Begin acquiring additional shares through our discretionary accounts. Move cautiously to avoid price spikes. Target 15% ownership. Priority authorization." Marcus responded with a single word. "Understood." Elijah turned to Amara. "You mentioned you recorded what happened?" She nodded, pulling out her phone. "I started recording when the captain got involved. The body language alone tells the story. Them standing over you, the security intimidation tactic. Classic power play." "I'd appreciate a copy," Elijah said. "Of course." She sent the video file to his encrypted email. Zoe's comprehensive analysis arrived next. Transglobal Aviation Group had faced 3 discrimination lawsuits in the past 5 years, all settled confidentially. Their board was predominantly white and male, with only 1 person of color among 12 directors. Their corporate diversity statistics were below industry average, and their training programs had been criticized as superficial. Most importantly, their annual shareholders meeting was scheduled in just 2 weeks. Perfect timing. Elijah's tablet chimed with another message, this one from his assistant Morgan. Tokyo clients informed about potential delay. They've offered flexibility, willing to postpone by 24 hours if necessary. Said recent news makes them eager to work with an American company that stands for something. The recent news reference puzzled him until Morgan sent a follow-up. Video of incident already circulating online. Passenger behind you shared to social media. Currently at 50K views and climbing. Business class while black trending in some markets. The digital wildfire had already begun. Elijah wasn't sure whether to be grateful for the unexpected amplification or concerned about the potential distraction. He decided it was neither good nor bad, simply another factor to incorporate into his strategy. Amara had been watching the controlled intensity with which he worked. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "most people never get the chance to fight back against this kind of treatment. They suffer these indignities without the resources to make themselves heard." "I'm well aware of my privilege in that regard," Elijah replied. "That's precisely why I can't let this pass. What happened today wasn't just about me." "It never is," Amara agreed. "These incidents are never isolated. They're symptoms of deeper cultural problems." Elijah nodded, memories surfacing unbidden. His father being followed around department stores, his college roommate's parents' poorly disguised disappointment upon meeting him. The prospective client who asked to speak with whoever's really in charge during his company's early days. "Each time we accept these small injustices, we validate the system that produces them," he said. "Exactly," Amara replied. "That's why I became an attorney. But the law can be frustratingly slow and limited. Sometimes other approaches are more effective." Elijah allowed himself a small smile. "I've found that structural change requires multiple pressure points." Another message appeared from his executive team. Share acquisition had begun discreetly through various corporate accounts and allied investment firms. His ownership stake in Transglobal Aviation Group would cross 14% by market open tomorrow. "If you don't mind my asking," Amara said, "what's in Tokyo that's so important you were willing to take this flight after they treated you so badly?" "A $2 billion telecommunications infrastructure contract," Elijah replied. "Potentially the most significant deal in my company's history." Amara's eyes widened. "And you're still headed there despite all this?" "The meeting has been postponed by a day," Elijah explained. "And sometimes there are principles even more important than business deals." The flight attendants were beginning meal service, working their way methodically from the front of the aircraft. Brenda Barrett, who had been central to the business class confrontation, was now serving economy. Her demeanor had shifted subtly since the incident, less openly hostile, more deliberately neutral, perhaps sensing that her actions might have consequences beyond her immediate authority. When she reached their row, she avoided direct eye contact with Elijah. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked flatly. "Pasta, please," he replied with deliberate courtesy. As she placed the tray before him, Elijah noticed her hands trembling slightly. Word of who he was had likely spread among the crew. The power dynamics were already shifting. His tablet chimed with an incoming video call request from Zoe. Excusing himself to Amara, he put in his earbuds and accepted the call. "I've got more information you should know immediately," Zoe said, her expression serious. "Meridian Airlines has a documented history of seating adjustments that shows a pattern. They've moved people of color from premium cabins 27 times in the past year, when white passengers requested specific seats, citing elite status priorities. It's buried in their customer complaint database, but one of their former diversity officers just reached out after seeing the viral video. She has receipts." "Get her full statement and documentation," Elijah directed, "and contact our PR team. When we make our move, I want a comprehensive narrative ready." They spent the remainder of the flight developing what Elijah had begun, thinking of as Operation Accountability. By the time the captain announced their initial descent into Atlanta, he had the framework of a strategy that would address both the individual incident and the systemic issues behind it. As the plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Elijah made his decision. The Tokyo deal was crucial, but this situation demanded immediate attention. He would delay his international connection by 24 hours, enough time to set irreversible changes in motion at Meridian Airlines and its parent company. Amara sensed his decision. "Your connection to Tokyo leaves in about an hour. Are you going to make it?" "No," Elijah replied, a calm determination in his voice. "I have another stop to make first." "What about your big contract?" "Some things can't wait," he said. "And sometimes the most powerful business move is standing firmly for what's right." As passengers prepared to disembark, Elijah sent one final message to his team. Change of plans. Set up meeting with Robert Thompson, CEO of Meridian Airlines. Tell him it's regarding a significant investment position in today's incident. His office, 2 hours. The response came almost immediately. He's clearing his schedule now. Atlanta's bustling airport terminals faded into the background as Elijah's town car navigated through midday traffic toward Meridian Airlines corporate headquarters in the city's business district. The gleaming 32-story building stood as a monument to the company's success, its glass facade reflecting clouds and sky like a massive mirror. Appropriate, Elijah thought, for a corporation about to face its own reflection. Beside him in the back seat, Amara reviewed documents on her tablet. After learning about Elijah's intentions, she had offered her legal expertise and, more importantly, her perspective as someone who had litigated similar cases of discrimination. Elijah had accepted immediately, recognizing the value of her specialized knowledge. "Their legal exposure is significant," she noted, scrolling through employment data Zoe had compiled. The pattern of seat readjustments disproportionately affecting passengers of color would be compelling in court, especially combined with their below-average diversity metrics. Court is time-consuming and gives them control of the narrative through delays in confidential settlements, Elijah replied. "I prefer more immediate accountability." His phone rang. Marcus Wilson with a financial update. Elijah put the call on speaker. "We've secured an additional 2.8% of TransGlobal Aviation Group stock," Marcus reported. "Combined with our existing holdings, we now control approximately 14.8% of the company. We're officially their largest single shareholder." "Perfect timing," Elijah replied. "Has there been any market reaction?" "Minimal so far. We acquired through multiple channels to avoid triggering disclosure requirements. However, social media attention to the incident is growing exponentially. The video has over 2 million views. TransGlobal's stock may face pressure when markets open tomorrow if this continues escalating. Keep our position steady for now. No further acquisitions until after my meeting." As the call ended, Elijah's phone immediately signaled another incoming call, this one from Robert Thompson, CEO of Meridian Airlines. "Mr. Washington," Thompson began, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a corporate executive accustomed to managing crises. "I want to personally apologize for your experience on our flight today. It was completely unacceptable and inconsistent with our company values. I assure you we're conducting a thorough investigation." "Save the prepared statement, Mr. Thompson," Elijah replied calmly. "I'll be at your office in 20 minutes. We'll discuss specifics then." "Of course," Thompson answered, a hint of unease creeping into his tone. "But I want to assure you that we take these matters very seriously. We're prepared to offer compensation for the inconvenience and—" "This isn't about compensation," Elijah interrupted. "This is about systemic issues requiring systemic solutions. I'm now your company's largest shareholder, and I have questions that will require substantive answers." A moment of stunned silence followed. I wasn't aware of your investment position," Thompson finally managed. "There's a lot you're not aware of, Mr. Thompson. We'll address that soon." Elijah ended the call and turned to Amara. "Corporate leaders respond to two things: public embarrassment and financial pressure. Today, they'll experience both." The executive floor of Meridian Airlines headquarters exuded corporate prosperity. Italian marble floors stretched beneath recessed lighting, while glass-walled conference rooms displayed sweeping views of Atlanta's skyline. Elijah and Amara were escorted through this monument to success by a visibly nervous executive assistant, whose darting glances between them and her phone suggested urgent communications were flying behind the scenes. They were shown into the largest conference room, where Robert Thompson already waited, flanked by what appeared to be his crisis management team, the airline's chief legal officer, head of customer experience, and director of corporate communications, judging by their expressions and attire. "Mr. Washington," Thompson greeted, extending his hand with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming. As I mentioned on the phone, we deeply regret the experience you had on our flight today." Elijah accepted the handshake with cool professionalism. "I appreciate your making time on short notice, Mr. Thompson. This is Amara Johnson, attorney specializing in discrimination law, who witnessed the incident." Thompson's expression flickered at the word discrimination, but he maintained his corporate composure. "Please have a seat. I've assembled our leadership team to address your concerns directly. I want to assure you that what happened doesn't reflect our company values." "Actually," Elijah replied, remaining standing, "I'd prefer to wait for the others before we begin." Thompson's brow furrowed in confusion. "Others?" As if on cue, the conference room door opened again. Morgan Chen entered first, carrying a leather portfolio. Behind her came Elijah's chief legal counsel, Zoe Michaels, chief financial officer, Marcus Wilson, and 2 additional members of his executive team. The power dynamics in the room shifted instantly. "My team," Elijah explained simply, "and we're still missing some participants." Before Thompson could respond, the door opened once more. A professionally dressed black woman entered, her expression resolute. Thompson's face registered shock. "Denise, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Robert," she replied coolly. "Mr. Washington thought my perspective as your former diversity officer might be valuable to this discussion." "This is highly irregular," Thompson protested, his corporate veneer cracking. "Denise Rogers left our company over 8 months ago. She signed confidentiality agreements." "Which protect proprietary business information," Denise clarified, "not discriminatory practices. I reported and documented before my abrupt reassignment to an office with no responsibilities." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Elijah's team methodically unpacked laptops and tablets, arranging themselves around one half of the conference table with the practiced efficiency of executives accustomed to high-stakes meetings. "One final participant," Elijah announced as his tablet chimed. He accepted the video call, and the wall-mounted screen came to life, displaying the face of an older white man with stern features. "Mr. Harrison Scott, chairman of Transglobal Aviation Group's board of directors, has agreed to join us remotely." The blood drained from Thompson's face. "You contacted our parent company's board chair without going through proper channels?" "As the largest individual shareholder in Transglobal Aviation Group, I have certain prerogatives," Elijah stated calmly. Mr. Scott agreed this situation warranted his immediate attention. "Indeed," the chairman confirmed from the screen, his expression grave. "Proceed, Mr. Washington." Elijah nodded to Morgan, who distributed tablets to everyone in the room. "You're now looking at a comprehensive report my team has compiled. It documents a pattern of discriminatory treatment at Meridian Airlines, particularly regarding premium cabin reseating incidents over the past 18 months. He waited as Thompson and his team scrolled through the first few pages, their expressions morphing from professional concern to genuine alarm. "As you can see," Elijah continued, "passengers of color were 26 times more likely to be asked to change their premium cabin seats than white passengers when conflicts arose. In 68% of these cases, the explanation given was status member preferences, exactly as in my situation today." This needs context," Thompson stammered. "Elite status members often have legitimate—" "I'm also an elite status member," Elijah interrupted, "with over 1 million miles on your airline. Yet that information was ignored when Bradley Whitfield demanded my seat." Elijah tapped his tablet, and the conference room screen split to show the video Amara had recorded. The footage was damning. Captain Richards and Brenda Barrett clearly pressuring Elijah despite his valid documentation, the implied threat of security intervention, and the humiliating walk to economy class past staring passengers. "This isn't an isolated incident," Elijah continued as the video played. "It's a reflection of corporate culture, which brings us to Mr. Whitfield." Another tap brought up the man's profile. Bradley Whitfield, mid-level sales director at Apex Consulting. Not a 2-million-mile flyer as he claimed, not even a Platinum Elite member, just a standard Gold member with approximately 340,000 lifetime miles. Thompson's team exchanged alarmed glances. The head of customer experience began, frantically checking her own device. What Mr. Whitfield does have, Elijah continued, is a brother-in-law named James Harker, who serves as Meridian's regional director for Chicago operations. A fact confirmed by these text messages exchanged minutes before I boarded. The screen displayed the damning evidence. Whitfield texting Harker about wanting his usual seat, despite it being assigned to someone else, and Harker responding that he'd take care of it with a call to the gate. "Where did you get those messages?" Thompson demanded, his composure completely abandoned. "Mr. Harker's company phone records are accessible to Transglobal Aviation Group's Internal Audit Committee," Chairman Scott interjected from the screen, "which I authorized after Mr. Washington raised serious concerns about today's incident." The room fell silent as the magnitude of the situation sank in. This wasn't merely a customer complaint to be managed with placating offers of miles or upgrades. This was a systemic failure exposed by someone with both the influence and determination to demand real accountability. Would you take action against discrimination if you had the power that Elijah possesses? Comment number 1. If you believe corporations should face serious consequences for racist practices, and hit the like button if you support holding companies accountable for their actions. Subscribe to see how this confrontation unfolds, because sometimes real change requires more than just speaking up. It demands action backed by power. What do you think Elijah will do next? Will he accept an apology, or is he planning something more substantial? The conference room had transformed from a corporate showplace to a war room. Documents, data, and evidence of Meridian Airlines' discriminatory practices covered the digital displays, while executives frantically whispered to each other. Robert Thompson had abandoned his initially dismissive attitude as the gravity of the situation became undeniable. "Mr. Washington," he said, his voice now stripped of its corporate polish, "I want to personally apologize for what happened today. Clearly, there are serious issues that require immediate attention. We're prepared to offer—" "This isn't about me," Elijah interrupted, his voice level but firm. "This is about a pattern of behavior that reflects systemic problems in your corporate culture. I'm more interested in solutions than apologies." Chairman Scott spoke up from the video conference. "The board takes these allegations extremely seriously. If verified, they represent significant legal and reputational risk to Transglobal Aviation Group." "They're already verified," Amara interjected, scrolling through the documentation. "The statistical pattern alone would satisfy the initial burden of proof in a class action setting. Add the documented complaints, employee testimonials, and today's incident with its corresponding evidence of preferential intervention. This is a plaintiff attorney's dream case." Denise Rogers, the former diversity officer, nodded in agreement. "I raised these exact concerns in quarterly reports for 2 years. Each time they were classified as isolated incidents requiring no systemic response." Thompson's legal counsel leaned forward. "We should take this discussion offline to explore resolution options that work for all parties." Translation: "They want to buy your silence," Amara whispered to Elijah, though loudly enough for others to hear. Elijah checked the time on his watch, a subtle reminder of the Tokyo meeting still awaiting him. His competing priorities weighed heavily. The historic business deal representing years of work versus the principle at stake in this room. His phone vibrated with a message from his Tokyo team. "Nakamura executives following incident coverage. Express solidarity, willing to postpone by 48 hours if needed. Say your stance against discrimination aligns with their corporate values." The unexpected support reaffirmed his course. Sometimes taking a stand enhanced rather than hindered business relationships, at least with the right partners. "Here's what's going to happen," Elijah announced, his decision crystallized. "Meridian Airlines will implement a comprehensive overhaul of its policies, practices, and training." He nodded to Morgan, who distributed another document to everyone present. "This is the Washington Standard, a detailed framework my company developed for inclusive excellence. It includes transparent reporting metrics, accountability structures, and consequences for discriminatory actions at every level of the organization." Thompson reviewed the document with growing discomfort. "This is extremely detailed and would require significant resources to implement." Consider it an investment in avoiding both litigation and continued public relations damage, Elijah replied. The alternative is a shareholder action I'm prepared to initiate, calling for removal of executives who have presided over discriminatory practices. The threat hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone. With Elijah's 14.8% stake and the evidence compiled, he could create enough shareholder pressure to force significant board-level changes. Additionally, Elijah continued, there must be immediate accountability for today's incident. I want the termination of all personnel directly involved in the discriminatory treatment I experienced. Thompson's face tightened. You're talking about firing Captain Richards and the flight attendants? That seems excessive for a single incident. It wasn't a single incident, Elijah corrected. It was a culminating demonstration of your airline's culture. The crew didn't make an isolated mistake. They enacted established informal policies, confident in their protection. Firing staff over customer disputes sets a concerning precedent, argued Thompson's legal counsel. More concerning than the precedent of allowing discriminatory treatment without consequences, Elijah countered. My walk through that plane past dozens of staring passengers wasn't just humiliating for me. It sent a message to everyone watching. About whose comfort and dignity your company values. Chairman Scott cleared his throat from the video screen. Mr. Thompson, I believe Mr. Washington's concerns merit serious consideration. The evidence presented suggests liability exposure that could impact shareholder value significantly. Thompson recognized the shifting winds. When the board chairman started talking about shareholder value, resistance became futile. We can implement the policy changes and diversity initiatives, he conceded. But terminating staff without a formal investigation process would create labor issues with our unions. You seemed quite comfortable with summary judgment when it involved removing me from my rightful seat, Elijah observed. But I understand process matters. You have 24 hours to complete your investigation and take appropriate action. He stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. My team will remain in Atlanta to oversee implementation details. I have a business meeting in Tokyo that can't be delayed further. Thompson appeared momentarily relieved by this concession. Of course, we'll ensure everything is handled according to your... One more thing, Elijah interrupted. I want to personally deliver the news to the crew involved. They should understand that actions have consequences, especially when those actions reinforce discriminatory systems. The request was unprecedented, but Thompson was in no position to refuse. I'll have them report to headquarters tomorrow morning. As the meeting disbanded, Chairman Scott requested a private word with Elijah. When others had filed out, leaving just Elijah and Zoe with the video conference, the chairman spoke candidly. That was impressively handled, Mr. Washington. Few people would have approached this situation with such strategic thinking. Thank you, Mr. Scott. But this isn't about impressing anyone. It's about changing systems that damage people every day. Indeed, and speaking of systems, our board has been discussing the need for greater diversity in our leadership. Your background in both technology and inclusive business practices is exactly what Transglobal Aviation Group needs. Would you consider a board position? The offer was strategically timed, a way to potentially convert an adversary into an ally. Elijah recognized the move for what it was. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Scott, but genuine change requires more than adding a single black face to your board. Implement the Washington standards across all your subsidiaries and we can revisit this conversation in a year. Actions first, then alignment. After the call ended, Zoe gave Elijah an appraising look. You turned down a board seat that most executives would kill for. Some changes can only happen from the outside, Elijah replied. Besides, I have a company to run and a deal to close in Tokyo. Speaking of which, Zoe said, checking her watch, your private jet is fueled and waiting. The maintenance issues have been resolved. As they walked toward the elevator, Amara approached from where she'd been speaking with Denise Rogers. So, that's it? You're off to Tokyo while your team handles the details? Not quite, Elijah replied. There's one more thing I need to do personally tomorrow morning. Would you be willing to join me? The meeting with the flight crew? Amara asked, understanding immediately. Absolutely. Some conversations need witnesses who understand the full context. Exactly, Elijah confirmed. Some lessons need to be delivered in person. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of Meridian Airlines' executive conference room, creating an atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension inside. Elijah sat at the head of the table reviewing documents while Amara arranged recording equipment, a precaution they'd agreed was necessary given the sensitivity of the upcoming confrontation. They're here, Morgan announced, entering the room after coordinating with building security. All four of them, as requested. Elijah nodded, straightening the folders before him. Send them in, please. The door opened to reveal the four airline employees central to yesterday's incident. Captain Preston Richards, his first officer Kevin Barnett, flight attendant Brenda Barrett, and customer service manager Daniel Winters. Their expressions ranged from confusion to apprehension as they entered the unfamiliar executive space. None of them had been told why they were summoned to headquarters, only that their presence was mandatory. The shock on their faces when they recognized Elijah was immediate and visceral. Captain Richards recovered first, his jaw tightening as he assessed the situation. Please take a seat, Elijah instructed, gesturing to the chairs arranged opposite him. They complied silently, exchanging uncertain glances. Brenda Barrett's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her chair. I believe introductions are in order, Elijah began once they were seated. I'm Elijah Washington, CEO of Washington Enterprises, and as of yesterday, the largest individual shareholder in Trans Global Aviation Group, your parent company. He gestured to Amara beside him. This is Amara Johnson, attorney specializing in civil rights and discrimination law, who witnessed yesterday's incident. The blood drained from Captain Richards's face. First Officer Barnett shifted uncomfortably, while Brenda stared fixedly at the table surface. Only Daniel Winters maintained eye contact, though his expression had hardened defensively. You may be wondering why you're here, Elijah continued. Yesterday, on Flight 1283 from Chicago to Atlanta, I was subjected to discriminatory treatment that violated company policy, federal aviation regulations, and possibly civil rights laws. Today, we're addressing the consequences. Sir, Captain Richards interjected, his tone clipped but professional. If this is about the seating reassignment, I was simply following standard protocol for resolving conflicts when elite status members are involved. Were you? Elijah asked, opening the first folder. Because according to Meridian's own policy manual, section 12.4, confirmed seat assignments may only be changed in cases of aircraft equipment modifications, safety considerations, or operational necessity. Which of those applied yesterday? Richards shifted uncomfortably. It's not always that straightforward in practical operations. We make judgment calls to minimize disruption and ensure on-time departure. A judgment call, Elijah repeated. Let's examine that judgment. He opened another folder. Bradley Whitfield, the passenger you gave my seat to, is not a 2-million-mile flyer as he claimed. His actual status is gold, not platinum elite. He has approximately 340,000 lifetime miles with your airline. I, on the other hand, have over 1 million miles despite primarily flying private. The revelation clearly surprised the crew members. First Officer Barnett looked particularly uncomfortable with this new information. Furthermore, Elijah continued, Mr. Whitfield has a family connection to your regional director in Chicago, who texted instructions to give him preferential treatment regardless of confirmed assignments. Were you aware of that arrangement, Captain Richards? I was told there was a VIP situation requiring special handling, Richards admitted, his composure beginning to crack. The gate agent relayed instructions from regional management. So you prioritized an unofficial request over official policy, Elijah noted. But let's set aside the procedural violations for a moment and address the more serious issue. He slid another document across the table, a statistical analysis of reseating incidents over the past 2 years. Meridian Airlines has moved passengers of color from premium cabins to accommodate white passengers 27 times in the past year alone. 0 incidents occurred in the reverse scenario, This pattern suggests bias that goes beyond individual judgment calls. Brenda Barrett finally spoke, her voice tight with defensive energy. That's not fair. We don't consider race when handling seating issues. We focus on membership status and customer satisfaction. Yet the outcomes consistently disadvantage one racial group, Amara interjected. The legal standard doesn't require conscious bias, only disparate impact. We're just following directions, Daniel Winters argued. If there's a system problem, that's a corporate issue, not something line staff should be held accountable for. Interesting perspective, Elijah replied. The Nuremberg defense, just following orders. History hasn't looked kindly on that reasoning. The comparison clearly disturbed the younger crew members, though Captain Richards' expression hardened further. This is completely out of proportion, he insisted. We're talking about a seating assignment, not war crimes. It was one incident among thousands of flights. For you, perhaps, Elijah said, his voice lowering slightly. For me, it was another. Reminder that regardless of my accomplishments, my education, my contributions to society, some people will always see my skin color first, and my humanity second. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. You had options yesterday, Elijah continued. You could have verified both passengers' status. You could have offered Mr. Whitfield an equivalent business class seat instead of attempting to downgrade me to economy. You could have addressed the situation without security personnel creating a spectacle that humiliated me in front of an entire aircraft. He looked each crew member in the eye. Every choice you made reinforced the message that my dignity was less valuable than Mr. Whitfield's convenience. Brenda Barrett's composure finally broke. We never intended. I didn't think about it that way. That's precisely the problem, Amara noted. Not thinking about how your actions impact people different from yourself is a privilege many don't have. First Officer Barnett leaned forward. Mr. Washington, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up yesterday when I saw how the situation was being handled. I was uncomfortable with it, but deferred to the captain's authority. Captain Richards shot him a look of betrayal before turning back to Elijah. I understand you're upset, and perhaps we could have handled things differently, but this feels like an excessive response to what was essentially a customer service issue. That characterization is exactly why we're here today, Elijah replied. Your inability to recognize discrimination even when confronted with clear evidence of it makes you unsuitable for a position of authority over diverse passengers and crew. He opened a final folder and removed 4 identical documents. After reviewing the evidence, including video footage, witness statements, and pattern analysis, Meridian Airlines has terminated your employment, effective immediately. The shock was palpable as he slid a termination notice to each crew member. Captain Richards stared at the document in disbelief. You can't be serious, he said. 22 years of service ended over one passenger complaint? This will never stand with the pilots' union. It's not one complaint, Elijah corrected. It's documentation of your role in perpetuating a discriminatory system. The union has already received the complete evidence package, including your previous incidents with similar patterns. They've declined to contest these terminations. Daniel Winters stood abruptly. This is your personal vendetta. You're using your money and influence to punish us because you can. No, Elijah replied, calmly. I'm using my position to ensure accountability that would likely be denied to someone without my resources. That's the difference. The average person facing discrimination on your aircraft has no recourse, no voice powerful enough to overcome institutional protection of problematic behavior. He stood as well, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Your airline's HR representatives are waiting outside to process your exit. They'll explain your final pay arrangements and the terms of your separation. Brenda Barrett was crying quietly now, the full weight of consequences finally sinking in. My career is over. Your career with Meridian is over, Elijah clarified. Whether this becomes a learning experience that shapes your future growth or a bitter ending depends entirely on you. First Officer Barnett gathered his termination paperwork with resigned acceptance. For what it's worth, Mr. Washington, I think this wake-up call was necessary. Not just for us, but for the whole industry. Captain Richards was the last to stand, his face flushed with a volatile mixture of anger and humiliation. "You've made a powerful enemy today." "No," Elijah replied evenly. "I've removed an obstacle to progress. There's a difference." As they filed out of the room, Amara stopped the recording and turned to Elijah. "That was intense. How are you feeling?" "Like this is just the beginning," he replied, checking the time. "My plane leaves for Tokyo in 2 hours. The contract signing is tomorrow morning." "Will you make it?" Elijah nodded. "The deal is too important to miss. But so was this." "Do you think they understood the lesson?" Amara asked, glancing toward the door where the former crew members had exited. "Some did," Elijah replied. "Others didn't. But the message wasn't just for them. The entire airline is watching. Sometimes, change requires visible consequences to be taken seriously." As they gathered their materials, Morgan entered with an update. "Sir, the policy implementation team is already working with Meridian's HR department. The Washington standards are being formatted into their training systems now, and the story has gone international. You've been requested for interviews by major networks." "Decline politely," Elijah instructed. "This wasn't about publicity. Coordinate with our communications team on a simple statement emphasizing systemic change, not individual blame." "And the Tokyo deal?" Morgan asked. "Proceeding as planned," Elijah confirmed. "Sometimes standing on principle creates more opportunities than it costs." As they prepared to leave, Amara extended her hand. "It was an honor to witness this, Mr. Washington. Most people never get to see accountability in action." Elijah shook her hand warmly. "The work continues. In fact, Washington Enterprises is expanding our legal department focused on corporate accountability. We could use someone with your expertise if you're ever interested in transitioning from private practice." "I might just take you up on that," Amara replied with a smile. "It's not often you find a corporation willing to put principles before profit." "The two aren't mutually exclusive," Elijah noted as they walked toward the elevator. "The most sustainable businesses understand that equity isn't just morally right, it's strategically sound." 6 months had passed since the confrontation in Atlanta, and Elijah Washington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Chicago office, watching snow swirl around the skyscrapers. The city stretched below him, the same urban landscape where his journey had begun in Southside's modest neighborhoods. The view never failed to remind him how far he'd come, and how much further society still needed to go. His tablet chimed with a video call from Morgan. "Mr. Washington, the quarterly review of the Meridian implementation is about to begin." "I'll be right there," he replied, turning from the window toward his conference room. The Tokyo deal with Nakamura Technologies had closed successfully, right on schedule despite the 24-hour delay. Far from harming the negotiations, Elijah's stand against discrimination had actually strengthened the relationship. His Japanese counterparts had expressed respect for a leader willing to address injustice regardless of business pressures. The partnership had exceeded financial projections for both companies in its first 2 quarters. In the conference room, familiar faces awaited around the table. Zoe Michaels and Marcus Wilson represented Washington Enterprises, while Robert Thompson and several Meridian Airlines executives joined virtually. Most surprising to outsiders would have been the presence of Harrison Scott, now former chairman of Trans Global Aviation Group, who had retired from the board to work directly with Elijah's newly established Corporate Accountability Foundation. "Let's begin with the metrics," Elijah said after greetings were exchanged. Robert Thompson, noticeably humbler than during their first encounter, shared his screen. "Implementation of the Washington standards is at 93% completion across all departments. Employee feedback has been surprisingly positive. Many staff members have expressed relief that clear guidelines now exist for handling difficult situations. The data showed dramatic improvements. Customer complaints related to discriminatory treatment had declined by 78%. Employee diversity had increased at management levels, and retention rates for employees of color had improved substantially. The most significant change has been in our corporate culture," Thompson continued. "The standards created a framework for people to address unconscious bias without fear of retaliation." We're seeing employees at all levels intervene when problematic patterns emerge. Harrison Scott nodded approvingly. Similar implementations are underway at 12 other trans-global subsidiaries. The shareholder response has been overwhelmingly positive. Our stock is up 22% since adoption of the standards, outperforming industry averages by 17 points. Financial performance matters, Elijah acknowledged. But the human impact is our true metric of success. How are we tracking passenger experiences? Thompson shared the next slide. We've instituted anonymous demographic monitoring of premium cabin service quality. The satisfaction gap between white passengers and passengers of color has narrowed from 29 points to just 3. Nearly statistical parity. And what happened to the flight crew members? Harrison asked the question that still generated public curiosity. Thompson exchanged glances with his HR director before responding. They've taken different paths. Captain Richards retired from aviation entirely. He declined interviews but released a statement denying any discriminatory intent while acknowledging operational misjudgments. First Officer Barnett completed our new training program as a volunteer and now works for a regional carrier in the Southwest. He's become an advocate for industry reform, sharing his experience as a cautionary tale at industry conferences. Brenda Barrett took the termination hardest initially, Thompson continued. However, she recently participated in a documentary about unconscious bias in customer service industries. She's been remarkably forthright about her own blind spots and growth process. And Daniel Winters? Elijah asked. Still bitter, according to his social media, Thompson admitted. He's working for a cargo airline and occasionally posts complaints about cancel culture in the passenger airline industry. Elijah wasn't surprised by these varied outcomes. Accountability created opportunity for growth, but couldn't force people to embrace it. That personal choice remained with each individual. The meeting continued with discussion of next phase improvements, but Elijah's thoughts briefly drifted to Amara Johnson. She had indeed joined Washington Enterprises, heading their new corporate accountability division that helped other companies implement similar standards. Her legal expertise combined with lived experience made her uniquely qualified to guide organizational transformation. After the meeting concluded, Elijah's next appointment arrived, a documentary crew filming Challenging the Status Quo, a series about corporate responsibility. While he generally avoided publicity, this project aligned with his mission of normalizing accountability. Mr. Washington, the interviewer began once cameras were rolling, 6 months ago, you transformed a personal discriminatory experience into systemic change at one of America's largest airlines. What motivated you to pursue corporate accountability rather than accepting the usual apology and compensation? Justice isn't achieved through private settlements, Elijah replied. True change requires transparent accountability and structural reform. My position gave me leverage most people lack when facing discrimination. I felt responsible to use that advantage not just for personal redress, but to create pathways for lasting change. The Washington standards are now being adopted by companies across multiple industries, the interviewer noted. Did you anticipate this broader impact? Businesses respond to proven models, Elijah explained. We demonstrated that inclusivity isn't just morally right, it's financially sound. Companies implementing these standards have seen increased innovation, improved customer satisfaction, and stronger market performance. Excellence and equity aren't competing values, they're complementary. The interview continued, covering the foundation Elijah had established to help minority professionals navigate corporate discrimination. Already, it had supported 28 cases similar to his own, creating precedents for accountability across industries. Later that afternoon, Elijah boarded a Meridian Airlines flight to a technology conference in San Francisco. It was his first time flying the carrier since the incident, a choice he made deliberately to observe their transformed operations firsthand. The difference was immediate and noticeable. The check-in staff and gate agents maintained consistent professional courtesy with all passengers. The flight crew exhibited the natural warmth that comes from genuine training rather than performative compliance. Most telling was the diverse composition of the crew itself, including a black female captain who exemplified the pipeline development initiatives implemented under the Washington standards. As Elijah settled into his business class seat, 3A, by coincidence or perhaps intentional symmetry, he noticed a young black boy around 12 years old being escorted to a business class seat across the aisle. The child was traveling alone, his wide eyes taking in the premium cabin with unconcealed wonder. The flight attendant helping him showed genuine care, explaining the seat features with patience and warmth. "First time in business class?" she asked kindly. The boy nodded, a mixture of excitement and nervousness on his face. "Well, you're going to love it," she assured him. "You deserve all the best service we can offer." Those simple words, "you deserve," resonated with Elijah. How different might his own journey have been if he'd heard them more often as a child? If the world had consistently reinforced his worthiness, rather than questioning his belonging. As the aircraft climbed above the clouds, Elijah reflected on the true measure of success. It wasn't the billions his company had generated, or the technological innovations they'd pioneered. Success was creating a world where that young boy across the aisle wouldn't have to fight the same battles, where his presence in premium spaces wouldn't be questioned, where his dignity would be assumed rather than earned. The flight attendant approached with a pre-departure beverage. "Mr. Washington," she said, recognition in her eyes. "It's an honor to have you on board. The changes you initiated have transformed our workplace." "Thank you," he replied. "But the real test is consistency, ensuring every passenger receives the same respect regardless of who's watching." She nodded with understanding. "That's exactly what our new training emphasizes. Dignity isn't a special service, it's the baseline everyone deserves." As the plane leveled at cruising altitude, Elijah turned his attention to preparation for the upcoming conference. But part of his awareness remained on the young boy across the aisle, who represented both the reason for his stand 6 months ago and the hope for a more equitable future. True success, Elijah reflected, wasn't measured in personal wealth or individual victories. It was measured in systems changed, barriers removed, and opportunities created for those who would follow. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his stand against discrimination had created ripples that would continue expanding long after today's flight landed. Elijah Washington's journey teaches us that true power lies not just in wealth or position, but in the courage to use your influence for meaningful change. When faced with discrimination, he could have accepted compensation and moved on. Instead, he recognized that his unique position gave him the leverage to address systemic problems that affect countless others without his resources. The story reminds us that accountability matters. Organizations don't change through apologies and diversity statements alone. They change when there are real consequences for perpetuating harmful practices. By holding both individuals and systems responsible, Elijah created transformation that extended far beyond his personal experience. Perhaps most importantly, we learned that standing on principle isn't just morally right, it's often strategically advantageous. By refusing to compromise his dignity, Elijah actually strengthened his business relationships with partners who respected his integrity. His story challenges the false choice between doing what's right and doing what's profitable, showing how the two can powerfully align. What injustice would you confront if you had Elijah's resources? Have you witnessed discrimination that went unchallenged because the victim lacked power to demand accountability? Share your thoughts in the comments below and hit that like button. If you believe we all have a responsibility to use whatever influence we have to create a more equitable world, subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes standing against injustice, and share this video with someone who needs to understand that their voice matters. Thank you for joining me today. Remember that true change begins when we refuse to accept the unacceptable, regardless of personal cost.